Good morning, wherever this finds you. Welcome back to Solid Ground. It's been a couple of weeks since I've last done this show. If you've been following some of my other media or the likes of my Facebook and Substack, you'll know actually that my father passed away. Rory was his name, R-O-R-Y, in case people think it's Roy. He sadly passed away a couple of weeks ago, so as you will anticipate, obviously been with my family, my mother in particular, now a widow, but she's still with us. But yeah, all of that has kept me understandably distracted. But it's great to be back with you here wherever you are tuning in from. So this is one of Family First's productions. We are across platforms from Facebook, which I suspect many of you are using, YouTube, X, LinkedIn. If you want to make comments on the show, anything I say, any questions you want to put to me, jump onto the Family First Facebook page and put a comment in there. And so your comments come directly to me here in the studio. I can actually see them, which is why my eyes dart from time to time to the side, because I have a screen here which lets me know your questions. So say good morning, say hello, let me know where you're coming in from around both New Zealand and around the world. And pop any, as I say, thoughts or questions to me. There's a few things to touch on today. I'm going to go in deep to a couple of topics, one local particularly and one international. But I will just say where I started, my thanks, actually I didn't get to say this, but with my father's passing, so many of you have been exceptionally kind and messaging to say, well, basically you're just messaging, which has been absolutely lovely. And so all those thoughts and prayers and encouragement have been greatly appreciated. Ian, good morning. Lovely to have you on the show. I know my wife is watching as well, and other family members. So, when I see a double of numbers, I know that the sort of the wider Bridges and O'Connor family have logged in. And Rosie, lovely to have you on. Look, I know some of my regulars are here. And Rosie's from beautiful Taupo. I hope it's getting a little bit warmer down there at the moment. Hey, look, a couple of things just to start with, some smaller ones. This is a political point, but I will share it, and people can make up their own decisions. But I think this is actually a good news story, regardless of being it blue or red. So this is an editorial of all things from the Herald this morning, which made me sort of fall out of bed because the Herald was actually complimenting the government. But long and short, emergency housing numbers, if they're correct, then things are looking better. Long and short, the new government has prioritised families with children and getting them out of motels. So you'll know that the last government made a big thing about emergency housing and transitional housing, all the stuff they were doing. But what they ended up doing actually is, I would argue, very little. And literally thousands of families ended up in motels, which I think was a bit of a scandal, to be honest. I mean, there's no easy solutions to these things, but kudos to the current government. They've actually taken the bull by the horns, and as this editorial is indicating, actually there's two things to take out of it. One, that actually if the numbers are correct, then this is actually quite a positive thing. As you'd imagine, of course it's a positive thing to get, families with children out of motels and into houses. So that's been done basically by prioritising those families. So the flip side is other people, be it just mum or dad, or a mum or a dad or an elderly couple, they're not as prioritised at the moment. They're focused in on the children, and I think that's appropriate. But you'll notice that they say if the numbers are correct. It's a little bit of a barb in that, but to be fair on the Herald, there's been a few releases of data from the government recently, which hasn't quite added up. We're not at the Ginny Anderson Labour Party level of saying the number of police on the beat are down, blatant falsities. But I think actually in the law and order space, which is why, again, they put the word correct there, that the way the government's decided to chop up some of the numbers or present them have been a little bit awry. So long and short, Herald is saying, well done. And rightly thanks should be given to all those involved with getting families with children out of motels and into houses. But I suspect the journalists will be delving a little bit deeper at the moment to, ascertain if the numbers are indeed correct or there's been little games at play. The next one I thought I would put up is this little one. It's not a survey you can do. I clipped this from Stuff last night, and it's asking, well, as you can see, do you agree with the government's crackdown on working from home? And it'd be interesting to know what you guys think. So long and short, we all got during the COVID-mandated lockdown regressive years of having to work from home. And since then, particularly in the public service, and that's what this is referring to, particularly in the public service, and particularly in Wellington, because that's where so many are, a lot of civil servants, public servants, whatever you wish to call them, bureaucrats, have been working from home. And in recent days, the minister in charge of the public service said, actually, I want you all back. And I think there's at least two reasons for that. One is efficiencies. The likes of Amazon, actually, as in the big conglomerate, where we used to buy books and now can buy everything else, they've ordered everyone back to work, to be in, well, the offices. They believe that actually that interplay between people generates creativity. And I think that's partly what the government's also suggesting, that actually civil servants in your office, in the office together, work better. And the other side of it is you will have seen a whole lot of stories at the moment about how bad Wellington is, and bars and cafes and restaurants are closing and doing it tough. And part of the narrative there is that with literally thousands and thousands of civil servants working from home, they're not in the city. They're not in Wellington City. They're not going to get their coffee in the morning, lunches and so forth. And I highlight that because actually there's an element here I think you need to look into carefully with the media. They are spinning a little bit of what I call a sub-narrative. And what I mean by that is there's always the narrative, that the top line story, which is civil servants need to be at their desks working together. But under that sub-narrative is, the economy is bad, the government's running things badly, and, the big reason for this is they keep, sacking so many civil servants, and the civil servants are not at their desk. So you can just sort of see there's a slight, secondary message here. But I'd be interested to know, and I obviously follow up on across all the platforms after this. Flick me a comment if you think people should actually be back to work or working from home, or maybe you're someone who thoroughly enjoys working from home. I actually do quite a bit of the time. What's good for the goose should be good for the gander. But, let me know what you think, because I can see the merit in actually what the government's doing here. I'm just going to pick up something else. This is from the BBC. It's a debate that's clearly happening in and around the world. So as I say, Amazon wants all its workers back. The government, though, is disagreeing. This is in the United Kingdom, so Ken Starmer and his mates are saying, no, you don't have to go back to work. There's benefits from working from home. My suspicion, guys, for what it's worth, is that actually there's pluses and minuses. As someone who does work a lot from home, and look, only me saying it, I'm relatively efficient. I'm actually quite disciplined. It's just my nature. So I don't get too distracted at home. I'm able to do the work for the likes of Family First and my clients quite happily. I appreciate the fact that I'm able to, swap out the laundry during the day and put it out on the line without having to wait till getting home at 5 o'clock. But I can also understand where Nicola Willis is coming from in terms of this, they call it a crackdown. It's not quite that, but her encouragement, she is the minister. You're going, Nicola Willis? Yeah, she's the minister responsible in this space, I believe. And so what she's trying to do is just say, look, we want people actually back at their desks. And I know, having worked in corporate and I've worked in the public sector, there is something to be said about that interactions. Those are what I would term informal interactions, because yes, I can jump on a Zoom with colleagues and talk, but it's when you just walk in the corridor, or you just happen to go by a colleague's desk and you just have a quick chat, and it's just funny what happens. And look, if this does end up helping Wellington in particular, if it's going to help some of the cafes and bars and restaurants, well, that's not a bad thing. Ian's got a thought here that's popped on through. As I say, for those of you on other channels, if you're on LinkedIn or X or YouTube, firstly, welcome. Any messages you're sending at the moment, I will be able to see later on, but they don't directly come into the studio. But Ian is saying, I think it's good that some people sometimes work from home. but there are always some people who work well from the benchmark home. Yeah. So a good comment there. Long and short, and this is the conundrum, isn't it? There's no black or white. There's no black or white answer, is there? Some people really do work well from home. Others do not. I have to say one thing for me. I appreciate the fact that I don't have to travel all the time. See, when I was in Parliament, I kid you not on this, when I was in Parliament, minimum of 6 hours travelling a week. And by the way, that was just to Wellington. That's not all the travel. You jump in your car and zip between meetings, in this case in Auckland. But if I was flying to Wellington, it was a minimum of 6 hours return. So 3 hours to get there and 3 hours to get back. By the time I'd left home, got to the airport, got on the plane, flown, it's just something I definitely do not miss. Look, staying local, and I thought this was not a surprise. I picked this up yesterday. This is particularly in Christchurch, but it does apply across the country. There's a growing demand for Christian schools. And look, I just sort of draw that to your attention because we've unfortunately had, I don't know what's the right word for it actually, well, certainly over the previous government, we've had a real reluctance to actually engage or develop new Christian schools. I'm not going to mention which one or ones are in my mind, but I know for a long time they had to fight. They had to fight, actually, Chris Hipkins as the minister and the ministry to set up new Christian schools. And by the way, this can extend to other denominations and groups too. But there's been a belief that, really there should only be one schooling system, one state system. But, for me, when you get stories or headlines like this, parents know what's best for their children. And they want them to go to Christian schools. And there's at least a couple of reasons for that. One is, by and large, not always, but by and large, the academic achievement in these schools is better. Again, that's a generality. There's going to be state schools which outperform them. But the other is there's a value system. And I think it's important to stress, even though it is a Christian value system, it's not about indoctrinating. I think when I've talked to different parents over the years and why they send their kids to Christian schools, often when they're not particularly Christian themselves, they like the core values that do ultimately come out of a Christian school. Respect for each other, a bit of discipline, a sense that actually we can work hard and do better. All of those sort of values that are instilled are appreciated. And I suppose they're in growing contrast to some, again, underline that word, some state schools now which are getting completely, I was talking to some parents the other day, they're getting sick and tired of their children being indoctrinated. Doesn't matter if it's everything from gender ideology right through to elements on the treaty. It's just an indoctrination. They don't feel that their kids are actually getting a broad range of views, nor are they actually focused on the key educational outcomes. I mean, it's the whole thing you hear all the time. Reading, writing, maths. They want their kids doing those subjects or sciences or English, not the forever distractions that a lot of the state schools are having. So again, it's one of the reasons amongst others that there is this growing demand. We've got another comment from Christine and Brett. Good morning to you guys, by the way. As they're saying, I can't read all of it here, unfortunately, but getting the workers back in the offices won't do any harm. No, look, exactly right. I think that's an upside. As I noted, I think there's a slight secondary or a sub-narrative in play at the moment. If you look, for me, when I look at the wider news, some in media are very much trying to say government's not managing the economy well, and because of that, and everyone's stuck at home, working from home, and they're sacking all these civil servants, the likes of Wellington's dying. I think they're trying to link the economic problems in Wellington in particular to the government's decision to shrink or return the civil service to normal. But once you've, acknowledged that or parked that particular issue, I think you guys are quite right. Actually having more people going back into the offices will make a big difference. And that's not just in Wellington, it's Auckland, wherever. I mean, I have a client based out of town in the CBD, so I go in there at least once a week, and it just doesn't feel, there's more security guards around Commercial Bay at times than there are. Commercial Bay is near the ferry building in Auckland, if you haven't visited recently, a big shopping centre. I'm almost being facetious, but I'm also being quite, almost literally true. There are times when there's more security guards standing around than shoppers. Bit of a worry. Hey, keeping local, and we're going to move more international. And you know that I'm big onto the whole China stuff. Yesterday, I know these guys. Actually, the man on the left with the glasses, Freeman Yu, he was actually a Chinese New Zealander who got very badly injured years ago when travelling to Parliament to present a petition around foreign interference, and he and another involved in a substantial car crash. Absolutely tragic, and he's been quite disabled since then, but it has not disabled his advocacy. But for, I don't know, the suspicious-minded, myself included, it's fascinating. It's fascinating that actually they were on their way, travelling by car to Wellington, and this terrible accident. And get this, the police never actually looked at their vehicle for any signs of tampering. So obviously I can never prove this, and they can't prove it, but it's actually something that came out. It's called the Stuff Circuit. So credit to Paula Penfold and the crew. I don't always agree with what they do, but they've done an excellent series called The Long Game. And during that investigative series, they noted for Freeman, again, the man there, the police never looked at his car for signs of tampering. So it was another driver, I think it was a woman actually. Sorry, that's by the by. It's just to illustrate, it was not the same convoy. It was, I think, a woman with her children coming the other way near the desert road that lost control and hit them. But there's always been questions. There's always been questions by Freeman and a number of us since to go, well, was there something wrong with their car which didn't enable them to respond? And as I say, the police never investigated. But anyway, Freeman and others have actually penned a letter to the Prime Minister asking that actually there be more of an investigation into foreign interference in New Zealand. And I just wanted to mention them because I really applaud what they're doing. I think, unfortunately, a lot of our politicians have their heads in the sand. The open letter, I'll see if I can put it on my social media today for you to read it. It's a little bit broken because it's a translation from Chinese into New Zealand, but they're pointing out that there are a whole lot of what they call the United Front Working Groups. These are Beijing-sponsored groups in New Zealand who can try to influence politics, so donations to political parties. If you follow Chinese media, who are the political candidates or MPs that they are constantly talking about? They run the WeChat groups, and if you are someone like myself who speaks out against what communist China's doing, then you are abused. Chinese New Zealanders like these guys who try to comment are blocked. They're called dogs, you name it. It's pretty bad. They also talk about the ongoing harassment. It's not unusual for actually, if they're at a protest, photos are taken, they're sent back to Beijing in effect. I'm simplifying this for effect. And then your family in China are harassed by the authorities. So it's all pretty bad. They're asking the Prime Minister to actually do something. And I support them because actually, as I said earlier, I think basically New Zealand has its head in the sand around a lot of this stuff. And I don't believe that our current systems are sufficient for it. And their big call is that there should be a parliamentary inquiry into foreign interference. And I think it's a brilliant idea. It needs to be out in public. The Prime Minister and government says, oh no, we can deal with this through our intelligence committee. They can't, actually. And I can say that with a bit of authority because it's clear that it's not working at the moment. We've still got this ongoing problem. And just to confirm it, our SIS, our intelligence service, which I actually do have a lot of time for, has confirmed they are frequently talking to Chinese New Zealanders around issues of national security. And what this means is a number of these, not all, I'm going to be really clear about this, but a lot of the, what you'd call loyal Chinese associations, so the friendship groups and certainly the likes of the China Students Associations at our universities, these are effectively run out of Beijing. You don't get to be the chair of these community groups, friendship groups, student groups without approval of the embassy. And then those people, these groups, often harass different Chinese New Zealanders in different ways. I won't go through it all here, but the SIS has now confirmed that they do go and talk to these people. You can't arrest them. That's a whole police matter. Let's not get into that. But long and short, there's foreign interference happening here. China is a big player. These are two very brave, I would say, New Zealanders of Chinese heritage who, good on them writing, which is brilliant. Now, last thing I might jump to, because I'm all over the place now. We've talked housing, we've talked Christian schools, we've talked foreign interference, but I thought I'd just bring up the question actually around a UN vote reason. It's a bit of a foreign affairs morning from my side, is that last week New Zealand voted in the United Nations around Israel and Palestine, and long and short, saying that the Palestinian state had to be recognised is effectively what this resolution was about. And for some reason beyond me, New Zealand voted for this, which I thought was wrong actually at a whole number of levels. So as I say, the discussion on the UN General Assembly was a recognition that there has to be a two-state solution, that the Palestinian Authority needs to take control, and obviously peace in the Middle East. Now, everyone wants peace in the Middle East, let's be clear about that. But I just thought this was a very misguided decision by New Zealand for a number of reasons. First and foremost, we didn't need to vote for something that in many ways doesn't make a lot of sense. It was on a panel we held last night called Straight Talk, where a number of people from Rodney Hyde, Peter Williams, myself, Bob McCoskrie, and others were talking, Sue Reid and Rex Ardar. There seems to be this world of the UN where they sit around talking a lot, and it all seems very nice. And I see Tonya's asking me about this global summit pact for the future. Again, it's just another giant talk fest. So a whole lot of, celebrities and others get together and talk about their view for the future. Just as with this UN vote, they come around and talk in great theories about a Palestinian Authority running a new state of Palestine, and that Israel needs to do all it can to make this happen. That's not the reality of the world that we live in at the moment. Most of our allies, the likes of the United States, voted against the resolution. A number of countries like Australia, Canada, the UK abstained, but New Zealand decided to vote for it, which again doesn't make a lot of sense. We are allied, we have diplomatic relationships with Israel. Secondly, Israel hasn't been in the Gaza or West Bank since 2005, and I made this point last night that it's been, if you will, free or independent mostly, not a state, let's be really clear about that, but they've been able to run their own affairs since 2005, and they haven't. There's literally millions and millions of New Zealand dollars and billions of dollars from around the world that have been pumped into the likes of Gaza and the West Bank. And what have we to see for it? Well, nothing. Or to put it another way, what you see is a lot of tunnels, weapons, and leaders of the Palestinian Authority and Hamas leading millionaires' lifestyles. The head of Hamas hides away in Qatar with billions of dollars to his name. He didn't get it because he runs a successful business. He gets it through all the aid. So you've got to ask, well, how's the state going to function? And then the UN, and the one thing that aggrieved me, made a big deal that, the Palestinian Authority needs to take control. Well, they tried to back in, I think, 2004, 2005. And in Gaza, the Palestinian Authority fought Hamas, and Hamas won. And after Hamas won, they basically went around and butchered everyone who was part of the Palestinian Authority. So it's not a happy camp, despite, the useful idiots who protest in New Zealand and around the world. These guys like Hamas, a lot of the leadership of the Palestinian Authority, Hezbollah and others, these are lunatics of the highest order. They're terrorists. And the idea that the UN thinks that they can just pull together a viable state, and that if Israel just agrees to it, that somehow the Gaza and West Bank are going to turn into just happy, civilized, liberal democracies is beyond crazy. Which is why I say it was just a very stupid vote. It just does not make a lot of sense of what's happening. Now, that doesn't mean that we want the violence to continue. We'd love to see the de-escalation happen. I'd love to see the hostages released. We're coming up to the 1-year anniversary. Interesting that the UN never talked about that. So there's complexities here. Sue's nailed it here. So Sue was on with me last night. She said, it's very small font for me. Well, guys can read on the screen, but I can see enough of it as I think she mentions there too, there's no mention of the hostages. So it was stupid that we did it. We did not need to do it. It doesn't actually change the reality on the ground. And as I say, the likes of Israel have not been in Gaza since 2005. Let that sink in, guys. Since 2005, almost 20 years. And what's happened to the place? Now, that's not an argument that there shouldn't be a Palestinian state in the future. But let's be really clear. There are significant and major problems within the Palestinian people. Do not forget, Hamas and the Palestinian Authority fought each other and killed each other and butchered each other. And now they're butchering Israel. It's just madness. But I will make this point because we are seeing wider war developing. Now, in Lebanon, so this is another Iranian-backed group called Hezbollah, much better armed than Hamas. It looks like things are really ratcheting up there, and I want to make two quick points before I wrap up this morning. The first is, well, you would have seen what they call asymmetrical warfare. So this is when Israel detonated a whole lot of pages and walkie-talkies. Remarkable surgical strike. If you follow war theory and dynamics like myself, with the foreign affairs hat on, quite remarkable. I mean, there's always going to be collateral damage, but if you've got a pager, then that's Hezbollah. So a remarkable way to have targeted these guys, but was clearly designed to unbalance Hezbollah, this terrorist group. And it's a recognized terrorist group, by the way, across many countries. But it's destabilized them, which is why you're now seeing an escalation of the more symmetrical warfare. So Israel's bombing and Hezbollah is throwing, I think it's probably up to thousands of rockets now across the border. So tensions are rising. But the second reason I mention it is this is pretty worrying actually for us down here. That's probably the message I want to get across. It might seem like a world away, but the tinderbox, which is the Middle East, should be of concern to each and every one of us, not just from a moral point of view, but even just geopolitical. As more disruption happens in the Middle East, it will impact our lives here. And I don't want to reduce the horror, which is the killing, hostage taking and the like that's happening in the Middle East, certainly in the likes of Gaza. But, everything's going to end up costing more as there's more and more disruption. As I say, it's not to reduce moral issues to utilitarian or just how does it affect me, but it's just trying to say this is not just a novelty that we see on a map or on the TV. These are events happening which will have, well, obviously real impacts on real people. People are dying there on both sides, but it's also going to have an impact on us here in New Zealand. So, keep as far as we can praying for a resolution here. But I will just add from what I was touching on the UN side, it's going to take it from both sides. I get quite frustrated when I hear all the demands that are being placed on Israel. And to be fair, it's good that there are demands being placed on Israel. But there doesn't seem to be any demands at times put on the terrorist groups. It seems, and others have written about this, it seems because Israel's a democracy, we expect them to acquiesce on everything rather than the terrorist groups. So anyway, I've gone off on a tangent. Typical me. Hey, a last couple of points. Few things to be aware of. The euthanasia review that the Ministry of Health is doing closes this Thursday. I've just done the one for Family First, so I've gone through the process myself. It's pretty quick and simple. You don't need to fill out every box and form, but I encourage you, if you've got a view on euthanasia, if you've got a view around how it's operating, then do this review. If you're not sure about what is or is not happening, can I direct you to my Substack? It's there, onpointnz, substack.com. This was called Alarm Bells. In fact, I was on Q&A the other day talking about this. I was just highlighting the problems with the existing Act. And, important to stress to you guys, this was not me talking about the ethical problems of euthanasia. It was pointing out that there are already problems with the way the current Act is operating, including, amongst other things, euthanasia is fully funded, but palliative care is not. But I don't know, I took it as a good thing. My Substack got picked up by Q&A, so I actually was on with Jack Tame on Sunday morning for about 10 or so minutes, talking through that article, talking through how the law is not operating as well as proponents want to point out. So that's the other thing to bear in mind. At the moment, those who support euthanasia are telling you that the law is working perfectly. It's not. So it was great to be. As I said, I haven't been on Q&A for a while, so it was nice to be on. And I know a lot of people have been commenting on my Facebook about Jack and how he runs his interviews. I actually thought this was pretty good and had some really good chats with him. So thanks for that opportunity. As I say, you can jump onto Substack to find mine. And also, speaking of if you want to find my Substack, just look up On Point. You can come onto any of my social media. My colleague Bob McCoskrie, also does a Substack. You can find it again if you go to substack.com and search for my name, or of course you search for Bob's. He writes much more prolifically than I do, but his stuff is all very good. So jump on and see his stuff there. All sorts of topics, by the way. And speaking of events, just a bit of a shout out. I'm actually in Christchurch on Saturday. They've got the March for Life there. You can see all the details. Victoria Square from 1 o'clock. Come along, go on to their Facebook page. If you look up March for Life Canterbury or March for Life Christchurch, you'll find their Facebook page. A great way to find out details about who's going to be there, what signs suggested to bring, and so forth. So a shout out to them. And finally, moving across, I've always got my radio show. Got some really interesting guests lined up this Friday. So from 10 a.m., Friday, 10 a.m. for 2 hours, I'm in the hot seat. Chatting away. So join in there if you haven't had enough of me already. And then lastly, because this is Family First, we are doing a lot these days, here's a little promo of all the social media, all the programs that we're engaging with.
If you're looking for news that you can trust, commentary on key family and social issues, and conservative conversations, go no further. Family First has them all. Monday nights, live at 8 p.m, Straight Talk with our panel. Tuesday mornings, live at 8 a.m, Solid Ground with Simon O'Connor. Wednesdays, watch for the latest episode of Pulse Point to drop. We watch the news so that you don't have to. Thursdays, live at 5 p.m, political playback with Bob McCoskrie and Simon O'Connor discussing the week in Parliament and politics in general. Plus, there's regular episodes of social commentary with Mick Blogg and interviews on family matters throughout the week. You can watch these live and also on demand on our website, Facebook page, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, and on our YouTube channel. Finally, something worth watching that you can trust. Go to familyfirst.watch for more details.
So no shortage, guys, of content. Different faces, different voices, different perspectives, but all within that family first, family, really. So do check them out. Always let us know what you think. As you know, you can comment as you've done this morning. I always go back on to all the various platforms. I can't always reply to everything. Life is busy, but I read all the comments. I know Bob does as well as to the wider team. So let us know what you think. You can always email us, of course, let us know. And also topics that are of interest to you within that sort of family first space. And I've just done some more podcast recording. You would have seen in recent days, if you've been following the Family Matters podcast, again, you can find that on the Family First page or YouTube, but sat down with Dr. Dermot Kearney. He's a physician in the UK who does amazing work, but also in his case around abortion reversal pills, and become a bit of a controversy here in New Zealand because the Ministry of Health doesn't want you to talk about it. So we went and said, we will. So fascinating chat with him. And then last night, actually, I sat down with a Finnish MP, Päivi Räsänen. You may have heard me talk about her before because I had her on RCR, Reality Check Radio, a few months back. But I sat down with her for a Family Matters podcast where we talk about her now going before the courts for a third time for quoting the Bible. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not missing anything out. She's quoted the Bible and she was arrested and charged. Crazy. You'll have to tune into the podcast to hear more. So you'll see that come up in the next week or so. We just got to do the post-production. But guys, in the meantime, I better finish there. I've just looked at the time. There are things I need to do. Thank you for joining me again on Solid Ground. Thanks for all your thoughts and comments. As I said at the start, to all of you who have sent your sympathies, thoughts and prayers to my family on the passing of my father over recent days, thank you so much. May you have a wonderful rest of the day, and I look forward to seeing you next week.